Code of Jewish Law, chapter 65. We're up to number 25. So we are in the middle of discussing the laws of interest, of not paying interest, not charging interest, various things. So what we're going to discuss is as follows. We have a Jew acting on behalf of a non-Jew to acquire a loan from a fellow Jew. All right. So the Jewish person is an agent for the non-Jewish person, but the money is being transferred from Jewish person to Jewish person. So let's have a look at it. Number 25, chapter 65, number 25. Akum Sha'amal Yisrael. We have a non-Jew instructs a Jew as follows. Loive b'shvili mos beribus Yisrael. Borrow money on my behalf with interest from a second Jew. Al mashkan zeh, with this collateral. Now, that's if he gives him collateral, that's the best. But even if he doesn't actually give him an item of collateral, but he gives him like a promissory note, a deed that he owes this money, a contract, then so the Jewish person is going to a Jewish lender with this collateral or promissory note on behalf of the non-Jew. So in this case, a malva soimich es al atzmoi. The malva, the lender, the Jewish person who's lending the money, he'll give the loan because he's relying rak al mashkin or ashtar shel akum, either on the collateral or the promissory note of the non-Jew, because either he's got the collateral, if the non-Jew doesn't pay, he'll just keep the collateral, sell it, or he'll use a promissory note to go to court. And therefore, it's very clear. And the other point is, this shliach, this Jewish agent, the broker, has no responsibility, no liability for the loan at all. Then mutter, this is allowed. So even though it's the Jewish person giving the collateral to another Jewish person and collecting the cash from the Jewish person, and he's going to go bring it to the non-Jew, it's not the Jewish person taking the loan on interest. He is merely an agent, like a broker. Now, this is not only he took the loan, but even if this Jewish agent is going to be the one to bring the payment back with the interest. Not to the kabloi. The Jewish lender is allowed to accept the money. It's no problem because he's merely acting as an agent. Well, now, we're going to put one condition on it. This is only if the lender decided seriously in his mind that the entire liability for the collateral and the money, this is whether both when he's giving it in and when he accepts it, it's all his own responsibility, and this agent has no responsibility. Okay? So even though the Jewish person is delivering the collateral, but he has no responsibility for it. Even though he'll bring the money and take the collateral back, but he still has no responsibility for it. The lender has responsibility for the collateral from the time he receives it to the time it returns to the non-Jew's hand. So if all these conditions are in place, that there's collateral or promissory note, then it's clear that the Jewish person is just acting as an agent and not as opposed to, because what could it be? is I might borrow from another Jew on interest and then lend to this non-Jew on interest, and that we can't do. So as long as these conditions are in place, it's clear that he's just an agent, and it's not a loan from one Jew to another Jew, then to a non-Jew. Okay, 26. Similarly, we're just going to reverse it. Now, instead of the Jew being the one lending the money, the Jew is the one borrowing the money. Instead of a non-Jew borrowing from a Jewish person, it's now a Jew borrowing from the non-Jew, but still with another Jew as the agent. So if he borrows on a collateral, or he has some type of contract, a promissory note, so with this collateral or promissory note, he can borrow from interest, with interest from a non-Jew. So it's going to be the same conditions. As long as the non-Jew is only giving the loan based on the collateral promissory note, and this shliach, this Jewish middleman, has no responsibility other than being a broker and a someone who collects and passes on, other than being a messenger, then mutter, this is allowed. The thing, and similarly, now we're going to change the case slightly again. A Jew lends money to another Jew, interest-free, of course, because it's Jew to Jew, on collateral. And afterwards, right, when the loan's due, the one who lent the money tells the guy who borrowed it, borrow money, in other words, borrow the amount I owe you from a non-Jew with interest with this collateral. And I'll pay the non-Jew both the principal amount plus the interest. So, as long as the non-Jew is lending the money only on the basis, he's totally reliant on the collateral, then mutter, that's allowed. Okay. 27. Okay, now we're going to twist the case a drop more again. Yisrael shehilva la'akum al mashkin beribus. A Jew lent money to a non-Jew on collateral with interest. The interest was a certain amount per month. Let's say $10 a month. Let's make up a number. And afterwards, this Jew approaches a fellow Jew and asks him to lend him on the collateral that he got from the non-Jew. And he will collect from the non-Jew the ribis that's due from today into the time repayment. Mutter, this is allowed, because essentially what's happening is he's selling the loan. Selling the loan. So, however, if first he already converted the principal together with the interest for the entire duration of the loan, right, into one debt. So instead of it being, I owe $100 and every month I pay another $10, so that that's what we said in the previous case. He can sell that loan off, and the Jew who he sold it to can take over paying those payments. However, if we said, oh, it's a 1-year loan and $100 over the year, $10, so now it's $220, a loan of $220. We convert it into one total, and that becomes the new loan. Then the principal and everything, now it's forbidden, it's illegal for the first guy to borrow an interest from his fellow to pay off this collateral, because it's like he pays the ribis to another Jew out of his own pocket. All right. So in other words, if you sell a loan, that's essentially just the principal. And it happens to be each month you hold on to this loan, there's a fee. So the interest is a fee that accrues each month. So it's no problem because you're really only selling the basic amount. And each month he could pay it back straight away. But each month he decides to keep it, he pays a fee to the non-Jew that I would have had to pay if I was keeping it. That's allowed. But if the interest and the loan gets converted into one total that's owed, then I can't sell it on to another Jew because it's like he's giving me the interest. Okay. 28. Maso Shishol of Kodim B'Yad Akum. A Jewish person, he deposited money in the hands of a non-Jew. He invested. So what happened is, I got my $1,000 and I give it to a non-Jew, and I say, I'm investing in your lending business, right? Your business. And I want to make a profit. The problem is, what's happening now is this non-Jew who I gave my money to is going to lend it to another Jew with interest. So the Hilva Oisam Yisrael Baribas, he now lends my money to a second Jew with interest. So it depends. If the non-Jew has sole responsibility for the money, in other words, I invested, here's my $1,000, you owe me in 12 months $1,000 plus my investment fee. In other words, if there's any loss, I suffer no loss. You must pay back my money. All the responsibilities on the non-Jew. So if this non-Jew would lose the money, he's obligated to pay back the Jew with his own money. Then mutter, it's allowed. That's just a straight investment. I invested in his business, and he gave a loan to a non-Jew. However, if the non-Jew has no responsibility for the money, so essentially, I didn't invest in his business, I made him an agent to deal with my money, then also is forbidden. It's forbidden to lend to another Jew with interest. And therefore, places where there's like a savings association, like a Yesh Yisrael Chalakim Shama, and Jews have a share in it. Yisrael Loibim Misham Beribus, and Jews borrow from it with interest. Even though the managers are non-Jews, it appears to me that this is completely forbidden, totally prohibited. It's also prohibited to deposit money there. Because maybe a Jew who doesn't behave properly is going to borrow there and pay interest. Likewise, you can't borrow from there. Because maybe a Jew who didn't behave properly knows he shouldn't invest it, and he did invest. So all these different, building societies and credit unions, different things that people are, it's whoever's a member is like a part owner. These become problematic. Nowadays, today's banks. Today you have shareholders, right? So shareholders, I guess, are technically partial owners. So according to this opinion here that we just said in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, if there's even one Jew who's a shareholder in the bank, then another Jew can't borrow. That's what he says. Okay. Reb Moshe holds that because today's banks are, it's a little more complicated. So he says that individuals who own stock, it's not significant. All that matters is the controlling interest. Now, if a Jew has a controlling interest in the bank or the company that's giving out loans, then it becomes a problem. But he's just a minority shareholder, there's no problem. Now, no problem with someone who's borrowing from the bank, right? Because at the end of the day, no individual owner has a personal liability to repay the loan. So you can accept interest from a bank, but you can't pay interest if it's a Jewish-owned, minority-controlled corporation. Okay. 29. You have partners. Have a partnership. Two Jews. And they want to borrow money from a non-Jew on interest. So they have to discuss with the rabbi what to do. Again, this is Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. It's only the summary, so it doesn't really go into details. But the underlying issue here is if two people took out a joint loan, two partners. So essentially, from our perspective, I borrowed half and you borrowed half. But since we borrowed it together as partners, the non-Jew could come and claim the entire loan, the entire payment from one of us with interest. It would end up being that I'm paying interest on your behalf. So it has to be set up. The loan has to be structured in a way that that's not going to be an issue. Okay, so that's that. So if someone's going to take such a loan, they need to discuss with the Rav how to do it. 30, last one. Mumma also luvais meno beribis. You can't borrow from a mumma. A mumma is someone. Now, obviously, a Jew can't become a non-Jew. Once a Jew, always a Jew. There's nothing you can do about it. For better or for worse. But someone who, for a practical purpose, he converted out. He's given up on his Judaism. Although he remains a Jew always, but for practical day-to-day issues, he's not Jewish. That's a mumma. So you're not allowed to lend or borrow from him with interest. Also, lending him money, you should be strict and not charge interest. So that is chapter 65. Any questions when we move on?
Rabbi, it almost seems like an acceleration clause to collect the interest. with a non-Jew, that they can demand the money all at one time, it seems. In a contract that's made, a bilateral contract that's made between
Yeah.
the goy and the Jew, he can demand the money at any point, and with the interest.
If that's the arrangement, I mean, if there's a minimum term, then that's the contract, is a minimum term.
It happens, like, I think, with mortgages. I think it
Yeah.
happens.
But I think, but let's say even like a person takes a car loan, even if he pays it out the first day, he still has to pay interest.
Yeah.
So that's different to a loan where you can pay it anytime you like, but every month that you have it out, you pay this fee. It's like a separate thing.
Yeah.
As opposed to one total. Yep. Okay, so chapter 66. It's called Hilchas Iska. Now, we just said that loans don't work. Yet loans with interest between Jews don't work. Yet we're all familiar, I'm sure we've all heard of loans where Jews do give loans on interest. So how do you do it? So what happened is we're going to discuss a concept called Heter Iska, the leniency of Iska. And Iska essentially packages this loan as an investment as opposed to a loan. So we're going to discuss what it is, how it is, when you can do it, when you can't do it, and various things. Before we get to that, just a brief introduction. We have a lot of Torah laws that obviously the sages cannot change Torah law, but they did relax certain things. So I'll give an example, not in this case, but an example. Technically speaking, if there was a court case about a loan, when the witnesses come, I have to, if I'm the judge, I have to interrogate these witnesses to the same levels as a capital case. Very high threshold of not only knowing the information, the relevant information, but even seemingly not relevant information, right? So let's say, for an example, let's talk about a capital case. The witnesses say that, the murderer, he stabbed him with a knife. So I might ask, where did he stab him? He said, under a tree. Okay. How big was the tree? What color were the leaves? I could start asking all these side point questions. The logic behind it is that if someone's seen something traumatic, like a murder or something, the scene is like seared into their mind, right? And they're going to know these details. And if they don't know the details, then we have to be concerned that maybe there's other details they don't know. When it comes to a capital case, when a Jew is being tried in a capital case by a Beis Din, under the authority of the Sanhedrin, we have to have a very, very high threshold. It's not beyond reasonable doubt. It has to be ascertained as absolute fact. Right? So technically speaking, financial cases have to be like that as well. What happened though was that because witnesses, it's one thing they see a murder, right? It was shocking. The whole scene is etched in their mind. Okay, someone borrowed $100 6 months ago. I don't know about the tree. I wouldn't have the slightest idea. Where was it? I don't know. In his office somewhere. What was the furniture? Which room in the office? I don't remember. Right. So what happens? What happens is witnesses were not able to meet the threshold. So people who lent money weren't getting the money back. So therefore, what happened was people stopped lending money. No one wants to lend money when there has to be such a high threshold for testimony to be able to get your money back. It's too risky. So the sages relaxed the interrogation, the witness interrogation protocols for monetary claims. And there's a lot of things that they relaxed or modified in order to encourage loans. Because if loans dry up, people can't survive. They can't ever have business. They can't. It becomes the economy is destroyed, and it becomes famine. Another example. Again, before we get to here, another example is the standard practice of before the Shemitah year of people signing over their debts to the Beis Din. So during Shemitah, it's called Pruzbul, right? During Shemitah, all loans are cancelled. Now, what happened was people don't want to lend money because the loan's going to get cancelled. Now, although it's true, it always existed that if the loan went through the Beis Din or various things or was handed over to the Beis Din, then that was not cancelled. But most loans weren't like that. So what they instituted at a certain point was that every year before Shemitah, everyone does a pruzbul. All money I own, I hand over to the Beis Din. All money owed to me, sorry, not money I own, money that's owed to me, I hand over to the Beis Din. Money I owe to others, I hand that debt over to the Beis Din. And what ends up happening is that since the Beis Din is involved, the court is involved, Shemitah does not cancel that loan. Shemitah only cancels a loan that's directly between one person and another person, not through the Beis Din. So this became standard practice. Otherwise, the economy wouldn't exist. There wouldn't be a business environment. People wouldn't lend money. So one of the things that was developed is this heta iska. In the ideal world, when we all live on our ancestral lands in Israel, we're farmers. Money is not really commodity. Money is just something we have, and we lend to other Jews interest-free, and that's how it should be. Today, the way of the world is, very few of us are farmers. Very few of us produce actual things. We're not tradespeople, not carpenters or shoemakers. Most people, their money is their commodity. That is what they have, and so therefore people aren't in a position. Many people to lend without interest, but you can't lend on interest. So if you can't lend on interest, you're not allowed to, and you can't afford not to lend without interest. What happens is people won't lend, and again, the economy dries up. People don't have the ability to acquire loans. People can't make investments in business. People can't set up businesses. People can't buy large amounts of wholesale and various things, and so this gives a big hit to the economy, and you end up with famine, recession, all these different issues. So therefore, the heta iska was set up, which, for practical purposes alone, but it's packaged as an investment. So let's say, for example, I wanted to borrow money to set up a business. If I borrow from someone with the heta iska, it's packaged in a way that the money they're giving me is not a loan. Rather, the money they're giving me is an investment. It's a investment capital for my business. And when I pay them back, I'm paying back the money they invested plus profit on their investment. as opposed to paying back interest. So it's a very fine line, but if it's set up properly, that's how it's viewed. Any questions on the introduction before we start learning inside? Oh, okay, let's get started then. Number one. Someone gives another Jew money to do business with. And the idea is they're going to split the profits. Right? I'm a silent partner, and I give them $1,000. He's going to invest $1,000, and at the end, he's going to pay me back my $1,000, and he's going to give me a cut of the profits. Now, if the profits are split, the gum, and additionally, the hefsed yashnei b'shava, both of us have equal responsibility on any loss, right? If he invests $1,000 and instead of making profit, he turns the $1,000 to $500. So now he only pays max $750. We split the loss. Zeho nikra iska. This is called an iska, but also, and it's not allowed. It's not allowed. All right. So what happens here is I'm investing $1,000, and if they make the profit, let's say it becomes $2,000, so I get $1,500. However, if the $1,000 became $800, we split the loss, and I get $900. So this technically is not allowed. Why isn't this allowed? Seemingly, this is straight investment, right? So although we said the iska is a way of borrowing legally with interest, but first we're explaining where it's problematic, and then we'll explain how it can be structured so it works. What's the problem with this arrangement? Essentially, half of the funds are considered a loan. And he takes responsibility for his half. That's why he's splitting half the loss. Because half of it essentially is a lot. So we lost all the money. Right? The $1,000 invested came zero. Well, he's still getting back 500. So in other words, he's taken responsibility for half the loan. Half is an investment and half is a loan. And on this loan, I, who lent him the money, get profit on the loan. They're going to hesed a love. And although it could lose, however, the Tatsi who bekodnetzloi, half I could lose. But the other half is like I entrusted it to him as investment. Because he's responsible to give it back to the investor. So there's a certain amount I'm always going to get back. And on that half, so the half I invest where I could lose it all, that's not a problem with lending interest because it's straight up investment. I could lose and I could make profit. The problem is the other half because he's taking responsibility in half the loss. So the problem with this half is that's considered a loan. That's why he has to pay it back. Nevertheless, should it be successful, I'm going to take profit. and I'm going to take profit from that half his seeds. And any loss on that half, now the guy is doing the business, and he's working, putting an effort on behalf, for not only for his half that's alone, but also the half that's being trusted. Why is he investing? Why is he investing time and effort to make money on my half? It's as payment for running what I've given him. But ribbis are awesome, right? So think it said in a very roundabout way, which probably didn't make it clear. Let's try and simplify it. I invest $1,000. Now, the way this loan or this investment is set up is that even if the whole $1,000 goes down the drain, he's still going to give me back half the money, $500. So essentially, I'm not investing $1,000. Essentially, what's happening is I'm investing 500 and lending him 500. Right? If I invested $1,000 and if it went down the drain, I get nothing, then the whole thing's an investment. But because I'm guaranteed, I'm only going to have half the losses if there's any loss. In other words, the worst case scenario is he's still going to have to pay me back half of my investment, 500 of the $1,000. Then I did not invest $1,000. In effect, I invested 500 and I lent him 500. And he is managing all 1,000 to make profit. Now, why is he managing all 500? Sorry, all 1,000. Not only the 500 I lent him, but even my 500 I invested. Why is he managing that? As payment for the loan of 500. In other words, I lent him 500 and I gave him 500 to do business of my money. And he is managing and trying to turn all 1,000 into profit. Why? Because I lent him 500. So the work he's doing for me on the 500 that is pure investment is interest on the 500 that's a loan. Is that clear? It's a little bit complicated, but did I explain it clearly enough? Okay. So that's why it's not allowed. So how can I make it permissible? What can I do? I can do this in a permissible manner. What's that? I pay him something for his work. So let's do it like this now. Same case. I give the $1,000. The same conditions. We're going to split the profits, split the loss. So essentially, 500 is a loan, 500 is investment. But now instead of giving $1,000 straight, I give $1,020. And I say this $20 is your salary for managing my money. Oh, so now he's no longer managing my money as ribbis, as payment, as an interest payment on the other half I gave him. He's doing it for his payment, even though it's only a token payment. He's doing it for his salary, and he's managing my money as a favor. It's splitting hairs, But again, as we gave in the introduction, the reason that we created these leniencies is because we can't allow the economy stop. That leads to recession, leads to people eventually to famine, to people not having things. So let's say that again. V'yesh ketelazeh. There is a leniency, a permitted way to do this type of investment. The investor gives this guy some type of salary, some type of compensation. And we say some type, no, it's even token. As payment for the work and effort that he's doing when he manages my investor portion. And you need to set an amount. So it might not be that I give extra money. We might say out of the money, before we split the profits, or before we split any money, first you take $20. So either we set an amount in the deal, or like I gave in the example, you give him some money at the beginning of the arrangement. Instead of giving $1,000, $1,020. And this is sufficient even if it's only a small amount. No, it's a token amount. Because what we're doing is now we've turned it into, yes, there's a $500 loan. That's that interest. He's managing my money. That's for this salary. Nothing to do with the loan that I gave him. Okay. I hope the differentiation was clear. Okay. Number 2. We're also there's some other conditions. Right? For this ISCA to work, there has to be potentially some other issues. We're going to discuss over the next few ones. All right. Excuse me. I can make the following conditions. That the guy taking the money, who's doing the investment, is not trusted to say that he lost money from the principal, unless he has the testimony of 2 valid witnesses. And on any profit, to share the profit, he has to make a shavu, has to take an oath. Right. So, in other words, there's 2 things I can say here. Number 1, I'm giving the amount to invest, and maybe he's going to come back and say, sorry, I lost it. Where did my money go? Now I want to get my $500 back. And I lost the $20 payment for him to manage my funds. So I can put a condition in the contract that he has to bring 2 witnesses that the business went, the investment went sour. You can't just come and claim it. Likewise, he comes back and says, you know what? Yeah, I invested $1,000, came $2,000. Here's your 500. Well, I don't know. Maybe you really turned to the 5,000, not 2,000. How do I know? So he has to swear. He has to swear. So this is allowed. You're allowed to do that. I can also make the following condition. Number 3, that the guy who I'm investing in, I'm giving the money, he has the following option. That if he wants the investor to invest a set amount, let's use $1,000, but for then the investor's share, profit share, he is permitted to do so. And he gets the extra. So let's explain this. What we're saying is the following. Till now, we were talking about whatever the profit is, that's what we split. If we make $1,000 profit, we split 1,000. Make $10,000 profit, we split 10,000. But maybe the investor is willing to make the following condition. I don't want a percentage of the profit. I want a guaranteed minimum $1,000. You make more than that, good luck to you. Keep it all. Right? So although I'm not necessarily going to get the most I could have, but I've taken out I've got a guaranteed certain amount. Right? So I exchange some of the potential for higher return for clarity that I'm not going to get a low return. So as long as we agree, we make this agreement at the beginning of the arrangement, this is permissible. And any extra profit the investor makes is his. And says Rabbi Grantzvi in the Sefer, "B'derech zehi nachon." He said this is actually the proper way to do it. Why? Because if we're going to make the person swear, he's going to come and say, "Here's your half the profit." How do I know he didn't make more? I'm going to say, "Swear to me you didn't make more." People swearing means you swear on a Sefer Torah. It's a very serious business. A lot of people aren't going to want to do that, which means they're going to have to pay money they shouldn't have to pay because they're afraid to swear on a Torah. But if we do this, if we make a set amount, then there's no swearing to do. Because who cares how I made money? That was the deal. If I make more, it's mine. That was the exchange for you getting a set amount. So instead of anyone swearing about what they earned, he gets the set payment that he agreed to in the beginning. And this is the heta iska, so benenu, that we do nowadays. So all this was an introduction from the Kitzur. Now, the heta iska that we do today, when we want to give a loan on interest without it being a loan on interest, is I invest the money for a set return. I'm investing $1,000 into you in exchange for $1,200 return on my investment. Now, although for all practical purposes this is a loan with interest, but as we said, we packaged it as an investment, and we've done it in this way because if we're not able to provide loans to people, then, as I said, there'll be no economy. It can't work. So essentially, these loans that heta iska are structured as a investment venture, and the return is structured as a, it has the halachic status as profit from an investment. So that is the heta iska. Now, that
Susan
works
asked you
very
a
well.
question. Susan
Sure.
asked you a question.
Oh, sorry, Susan. Yeah. Or should there be a time frame investment? There can be, whatever they agree on. This might be 1 month, 1 year, 30-year mortgage, or whatever arrangements people make. Whatever arrangement that's between. So a time frame is that would be what they decide between them. Yeah, thank you, David, for letting me know I wasn't looking in the chat. Okay. Now, this works very well if they make a profit. But we all know sometimes you lend someone money and they invest it and it doesn't always work. So it continues, the second half of number 3. Even if the person knows himself, he didn't make any profit. Or even if he made a loss, you can still give the investor sekeren, the principal, together with the profit they agreed upon. The ain comes shum issa, and there's no prohibition of ribis, of interest at all. Why? Because since he would have an obligation to make an oath that he didn't make the money, he could exempt himself from paying anything by taking the oath. And the fact that he chooses not to take the oath, that's why he has to pay. So this works out very well as a way of bypassing the ribis, the interest issue. Again, it's not that we're trying to bypass parts of Judaism, chas v'shalom. This is, as we said at the beginning, what happens is if people stop lending money, the economy dries up, society suffers. So this is what we need to do to make it work. Okay. Number 4. Avol, however, now we're going to give a slight twist on this that's going to make it not allowed. They made an agreement at the time of this investment that the guy borrowing or getting the investment is going to acquire the investor's profit in return for a payment. That he would have to pay him afterwards. A set amount irrespective of the profit. This is prohibited. There has to be the option. Right? So let me explain. When it's allowed, even though if he's a mensch, he's going to repay his loan, which was packaged as heta iska, but there is a way out in concept. He could swear that they didn't make profit, and theoretically he's exempt from the payment. Now he doesn't do that because he's a mensch and he borrowed the money. Well, put the money as investment, so he's going to pay it back. However, if they do a deal that I never have to swear, I always have to pay, then that essentially becomes a straight up loan with a interest payment. Now the way we do it, practically speaking, you can't make a loss. You're always going to get your money. But theoretically you could. And as long as theoretically you could make a loss, then it can be an investment and not a loan. But if you structure in a way that you cannot, it's impossible to make a loss, you're only ever going to get a profit, then that's not an investment, that's a loan with interest. Okay. Number 5. Nosen lo iska al zman. Investor, he gave the money for a certain time period. Let's just say 1 year to keep make it simple. This akev etzel mois gam achazmana peroin. But even after the amount was due, the year was up, I still have the money for whatever reason. Whatever. You weren't in town, right? It was for a 12-month period. Whatever reason, on purpose, by mistake, not able because someone wasn't there, someone wasn't well. Whatever happened, irrelevant the reason. The bottom line is, I kept the money for another 6 months. Then, and the money made more profit. I was meant to pay you after 12 months with a certain amount for your investment. But I kept it for now 18 months instead of 12 months. And it made more profit. So the guy who took the investment has to pay the investor extra profit for the extra time. So let's say lent 1,000 and I meant to pay 1,200 then the 12 months. So another 6 months, 1,300. We go proportional. Nevertheless, it's a better option is to specify from the beginning in the contract for this arrangement that if for whatever reason, in other words, there should be a clause in the contract that if for whatever reason I hold on to the money longer, then the conditions are like this or like that. In other words, if there's no condition, this is what we do. We just do the same proportion. However, much better thing to do is to put the exact conditions, what will happen if it goes overtime, undertime, all these various things. There should all be clauses in the contract itself. Okay. Any questions? All right. I wish everyone a wonderful week.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Pleasure. Wonderful week.
Thank
On
you, Rabbi.
Shabbos. Yeah, you have a question?
No, thank you.
Yeah, no, someone there? No, it's just been done. Okay. Take care.